Hello and welcome to MultiLateral Thinking. It's been another busy fortnight since we last spoke with the US election and the announcement by Pfizer this week and BioNTech on the efficacy of a new COVID-19 vaccine. I'm delighted that we have our very own doctor to talk us through the implications of this. It's Coriolis's very own Rebecca Harding. Rebecca, good to see you.
Good
It's
to see you
great that we have
too.
a vaccine. What does this mean? Does it mean we don't have to worry anymore?
You're right, it is fantastic that we have a vaccine, but it depends on what you're worrying about. I think any progress at this stage is good progress, and we have to celebrate that. But the key issue at the moment isn't necessarily the research and development or even the manufacturing responses. It's actually more about the policy responses, more about economic nationalism, and more about how the supply chain responds. We're going to hear an awful lot about cold chain and refrigerated storage over the coming months. A lot of this is about how we scale up. Now, let me just give you a couple of numbers on that. We've got 40 vaccine candidates. We've got 150 in preclinical development using different scientific techniques. So we've got this mRNA one, which is a new technique using a trigger to create the codes to produce an immune response. And then we've got protein, and these have different storage conditions. So they're all about how we're going to distribute these different solutions and which is actually the most scalable. So it's a global effort. We have to see it like that. And yeah, there's a lot to celebrate, but there's a lot to be concerned about as well.
And what do you see as the biggest economic and trade challenges from the vaccine?
Well, I think the biggest economic and trade challenges, to be honest, is all about the scale up. So trade is used to shipping vast amounts of stuff around the world. But if you look at the scale of the vaccine market at the moment, we're looking at vaccines across the world being worth an amount of trade of about 35.5 billion US dollars. That doesn't feel like very much. Okay, globally, that doesn't feel like very much at all. Now, if we take a look at how big the population is around the world, 7.8 billion, and then we think, well, to get some kind of herd immunity, we need to immunize probably around 60-70% of the population. We might have to give them 2 doses, and the range of costs on that are anything between $10 and $147 for a vaccine. If you multiply that up, that creates a market that is around 100 billion US dollars at the lowest end of the spectrum, and it goes up to 1.5 trillion if you take it to the highest cost. That's a massive scale up in world trade. Even if it's only 50% of that value, we're still talking about almost doubling what we have at the moment, possibly even quadrupling it. It's a huge amount of scale up that we need to start thinking about.
It's very Austin Powers, Dr. Evil, it sounds. I guess
Yeah, I guess so. But it's all about understanding what the market potential is and where and how we're just going to scale up at this type of level.
and I think that's partly reflected in the market. Certainly this morning, that there's a realization of, yes, we've got the vaccine, but actually there are health challenges in rolling this out. And I guess that takes us to the next question around the managing of supply chains. And, more broadly, who do you think are the winners and losers of this?
So a lot depends on which vaccines end up being the final products, if you like. So there's a big difference in terms of the storage requirements of the 2 vaccines that are the prime candidates at the moment. So if we take this new type of scientific development, it's very quick and actually quite cheap to produce, this mRNA vaccine, actually relatively straightforward. The protein ones take a lot longer to develop, but we're used to scaling up the distribution of those types of vaccines. So we actually already have the infrastructures in place. They don't require minus 70 degrees for storage. So the winners and losers from this first range of vaccines, and we don't know about the long-term efficacy. And I might be a doctor, but I'm a doctor of economics. I'm not a doctor of medicine. And unfortunately, as one of my sons said once very grumpily, you're not a very good doctor. So I can't actually comment particularly on the science behind all of this. But just in terms of the supply chains, this issue of storing a vaccine at -70 degrees for 10 days, and it can only be stored in a refrigerator in a doctor's surgery for 2 to 5 days, that creates a massive logistical challenge. And that's why we've seen markets react in the way they have. So the winners and losers are going to be the ones that can get this quick fix vaccine quickly, and that's likely to be the countries like the United States, like the United Kingdom, that have already bought large quantities of all of this and have the cold chain storage to do it, facilities to do it. The loser is going to be, of course, emerging markets where it takes longer to get these things out. It's going to take a huge and colossal coordinated effort.
And what do you foresee to be those unforeseen consequences? Because you've talked about the supply chains and from an economic point of view, what about the distribution from a sustainability or an environmental point of view?
So we looked at this actually this week in the Coriolis team, and it's quite interesting. There are over 1,000 companies who are involved in, let's say, the cold chain logistics of all of this. So moving stuff around, keeping it cold, making sure, or at sub-zero temperatures and so on. Over 3/4 of those are in polyethylene, in other words, a type of plastic that is fossil fuel dependent. It's intrinsically unsustainable. We've already seen through the COVID crisis face masks strewn across beauty spots. Single-use plastics have become an issue. So all of the glass, all of the storage, all of the stuff that goes into these vaccines and moves things around, that's going to be a real sustainability challenge, a real environmental challenge. And I think to end on potentially a positive note, we've seen airlines in Africa, for example, Ethiopia Airlines shift from its passenger transport to freight transport in order to be able to get solutions, PPE and medical devices out across Africa. Maybe there'll be a switch in sort of some of the transport that's going around the world. Maybe some of it will be more sustainable. Maybe that will be a quicker way of getting some of the vaccines to emerging economies more quickly. We have to hope that there's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit out there to try and solve the problems of sustainability, which are evidently there.
And finally, it does potentially allow us to see light at the end of the tunnel on this. From your perspective, economically, geopolitically, trade, what do you think the lessons learned from all of this are?
Oh, I think there are so many lessons. How long have you got? But I mean, if I wanted to narrow those down into two, the first would be about the immediate response to this, which was very economically nationalistic, protectionist. We saw between 94 and 98 countries at the beginning of the crisis actually lock down their exports and say we are going to impose export restrictions on key elements of the COVID-19 supply chain. We only saw two, India and India partially and Germany fully, that increase the amount of exports that they were doing. So there's been this massive protectionism that's come in, and I think what we've understood through this crisis, and particularly in terms of the vaccines now. The second thing is that this is a global problem. It's a global solution as well, because the R&D that's gone behind all of this is global. It's all been about collaboration across different countries and different organisations. And I think if we have a really long-term message from this, it's that the future is multilateral. It has to be, because it's a common shared interest in the future of humanity.
Rebecca, wonderful as always. Thank you.
Thank you.